Some stories start with a moment of clarity that changes everything. This is the story of a woman who spent her entire life building a home, only to discover she no longer had a place in it. Eleanor thought she knew what family meant, thought she understood her role as a mother. But sometimes, the people we love the most can make us feel invisible in our own home. What happened next would test everything she believed about herself, about loyalty, and about what she truly deserved. This is a story about dignity, silent strength, and the moment when enough becomes enough. Before we begin this story, do not forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you are listening to this story from. We will post new stories every day. I never imagined I would feel like a stranger in my own home. The house on Maple Avenue in Minneapolis had been mine for 38 years. I bought it when my son Michael was only 2 years old, back when I was a young single mother working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. Every corner of this house held a memory. The kitchen where I taught Michael to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, the living room where we watched his favorite cartoons together, the backyard where he learned to ride his bike, where I cheered every wobbly attempt until he finally got it right. I built this life with my own hands. After my husband left us when Michael was just a baby, I had no choice but to become everything for my son. I worked as a nurse during the day and cleaned offices at night. I sacrificed vacations, new clothes, nights out with friends. Everything went into making sure Michael had what he needed: a good home, a good education, a sense of stability I never had growing up. When Michael graduated from college, I felt like all those years of struggle had been worth it. He got a good job at a marketing firm downtown. He met Rebecca, a beautiful woman with blonde hair and a smile that seemed perfect for family photos. They got married 5 years ago, and I was so happy for him. I thought I had done my job well. I thought I had raised a good man. 2 years ago, Michael and Rebecca moved in with me. They said it was temporary, just until they saved enough for a down payment on their own place. Minneapolis real estate had become expensive, they explained. They needed to be smart with their money. I understood. I wanted to help. This was my son, after all. What kind of mother would I be if I did not support him when he needed me? At first, it felt nice having them here. The house had felt too big and too quiet since Michael moved out years ago. I enjoyed cooking dinners for all of us, hearing voices and laughter fill the rooms again. Rebecca seemed pleasant enough, always polite, always smiling. Michael seemed happy. I told myself this arrangement would bring us closer as a family. But somewhere along the way, something changed. I cannot pinpoint exactly when it started, but I began to notice small things. The way Rebecca would sigh when I asked about her day. The way Michael would exchange glances with her when I spoke, as if I was saying something foolish or annoying. The way they stopped including me in their conversations, talking around me as if I was not even there. It was a cold Tuesday evening in November when everything became painfully clear. The wind outside rattled the windows, and the early darkness made the house feel smaller somehow. I had spent the afternoon preparing a roast chicken, with all the sides Michael used to love as a boy: mashed potatoes with extra butter, green beans, homemade gravy. I set the table carefully, using the good plates, the ones I usually saved for special occasions. Michael and Rebecca came home late, around 8 o'clock. I heard them talking in low voices by the front door, their coats rustling as they hung them up. I smiled and called out from the kitchen, "Dinner is ready. I made your favorite." They walked into the dining room, and I saw Rebecca glance at the table with what looked like annoyance. Michael did not even look at me. They sat down without a word, without a thank you, without acknowledging the effort I had put into the meal. I sat across from them, my hands folded in my lap, waiting for someone to say something. We ate in silence. The only sounds were forks scraping against plates and the distant hum of the refrigerator. I tried to start a conversation. "How was work today, Michael?" I asked, keeping my voice cheerful. He shrugged without looking up. "Fine." Rebecca was on her phone, scrolling through something with a slight frown on her face. I tried again. "I was thinking maybe this weekend we could go to that new bakery on Lyndale Avenue. I heard they have wonderful pastries." Rebecca finally looked up, but not at me. She looked at Michael with an expression I could not quite read. Tired, maybe, or frustrated. "Michael, we really need to talk about this weekend," she said, completely ignoring what I had just suggested. I sat there, my words hanging in the air like they meant nothing, like I meant nothing. Michael nodded at Rebecca, and they started discussing their own plans. A dinner party at Rebecca's friend's house, a possible trip to Duluth. They talked as if I was not sitting right there, as if I had not just tried to be part of their lives. I finished my meal in silence, the food tasting like nothing in my mouth. After dinner, I cleared the table by myself while they retreated to the living room that used to be mine, to watch a show on the television. I could hear them laughing at something on the screen. That sound, which should have made me happy, only made the loneliness worse. Later that night, I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around me. This was my home. I had worked so hard to keep it, to fill it with love and warmth. But now, it felt like I was just taking up space in someone else's life. I wondered when I had become invisible. I wondered if Michael even noticed. The next few weeks followed the same pattern. I would try to connect, to be part of their day, and they would brush me aside with polite indifference. Sometimes Rebecca would complain about small things, the way I loaded the dishwasher, the temperature I kept the thermostat at, the noise I made in the morning when I got up early. Each complaint felt like a small rejection, a reminder that I was in the way. One afternoon in early December, I overheard them talking in their bedroom. The door was slightly open, and I was walking past on my way to the bathroom. I should have kept walking, but I heard my name and stopped. I just do not know how much longer I can do this, Rebecca was saying. Her voice was strained, exhausted. She is always here, Michael, always hovering, always trying to insert herself into everything we do. I know, Michael replied. His voice was softer, but I could hear the frustration in it. I will talk to her. My heart sank. I backed away from the door quietly, my hands shaking. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of my bed, trying to process what I had just heard. Hovering, inserting myself. Was that really how they saw me? In my own home. I thought about all the years I had given to Michael, all the nights I stayed awake worrying about him, all the dreams I put aside so he could have his. And now I was just a burden to him, an inconvenience in his way. That night, I could barely sleep. I kept replaying Rebecca's words over and over in my mind. I thought about the house, about the mortgage I had paid off through sheer determination. I thought about the sacrifices I had made, the life I had built. And I realized something that broke my heart. This was still my house, but it was no longer my home. The Minnesota winter arrived with its usual harshness, bringing heavy snow and bitter cold. The streets of Minneapolis turned white, and the days grew shorter. Inside the house, the atmosphere grew colder too. Michael and Rebecca stopped even pretending to include me. They had their own routines, their own world, and I was just an outsider looking in. Christmas was approaching, and I suggested we put up decorations together, maybe bake cookies like Michael and I used to do when he was young. Rebecca shot down the idea immediately. We are actually going to keep things simple this year, she said with a tight smile. Less clutter, you know. I nodded and did not argue, but inside I felt something crack. Simple, less clutter. Was that what I had become? Clutter in my own home? On a particularly cold evening, a week before Christmas, everything came to a breaking point. I had made dinner again, a simple pasta dish, nothing fancy. I called them to the table, and they came, but the tension was obvious. Rebecca sat down with a heavy sigh, as if the act of eating with me was exhausting. Michael served himself without a word. I tried to make conversation again, asking about their holiday plans. We are going to Rebecca's parents' place for Christmas, Michael said flatly. We leave on the 23rd. Oh, I said, trying to hide my disappointment. I did not know you had decided that. What about Christmas Eve here? Rebecca set down her fork with more force than necessary. Eleanor, she said, her voice sharp, we need our own space, our own traditions. You have to understand that. I looked at Michael, waiting for him to say something, to defend me, to acknowledge that this was still my house. But he just looked down at his plate, silent. That silence hurt more than anything Rebecca could have said. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I did not mean to intrude. Rebecca softened slightly, but the damage was done. It is not about intruding, she said in a gentler tone. It is just that we need to start building our own life. You understand, right? I nodded. But I did not understand. I did not understand how my own son could sit there and let his wife make me feel like an outsider in the home I had built for him. I finished my meal quickly and excused myself to my room. As I walked down the hallway, I heard Rebecca whisper something to Michael. I did not catch the words, but I heard the tone. Exasperation, relief that I was gone. That night, lying in my bed with tears running down my face, I made a decision. I could not keep living like this. I could not keep shrinking myself, apologizing for existing, pretending that everything was fine. Something had to change. I just did not know what yet. The house on Maple Avenue, the home I had loved and fought for, had become a prison, and I was the only one who seemed to notice. As the snow continued to fall outside my window, covering everything in white, I wondered if I would ever feel warm again. I wondered if my son would ever see me the way I used to see him, with love and respect. But deep down, I was starting to doubt it, and that doubt was the loneliest feeling of all. I need to take you back to understand how we arrived at this point, how the son I raised with so much love became someone I barely recognize, how the home I built became a place where I no longer belonged. Michael was born on a rainy April morning in 1986. I was 26 years old, terrified and alone. His father, David, had seemed like the right choice when we got married. He had a steady job, a charming smile, and he promised me the world. But promises are easy to make and even easier to break. When Michael was only 8 months old, David left. No warning, no explanation that made any sense. He just said he was not ready to be a father, that he felt trapped, that he needed to find himself. He walked out the door with a suitcase and never looked back. No child support, no phone calls, nothing. It was as if Michael and I had never existed to him. I remember sitting on the floor of our tiny apartment, holding Michael in my arms, wondering how I was going to survive. I had no family to turn to. My parents had passed away years before, and I was an only child. David's family wanted nothing to do with us. I was completely on my own with a baby who depended on me for everything, but I refused to give up. I found work as a nurse at Hennepin County Medical Center. The hours were long and the work was exhausting, but it paid enough to cover rent and basic expenses. When that was not enough, I took a second job cleaning offices at night. I would leave Michael with a neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who charged me almost nothing because she saw how hard I was trying. Those years were the hardest of my life. I survived on 3 or 4 hours of sleep most nights. I lived on coffee and determination. But every time I looked at Michael's face, every time he smiled at me or reached for me with his tiny hands, I knew it was worth it. He was my reason for everything. When Michael was 5 years old, I managed to save enough for a down payment on the house on Maple Avenue. It was not much, an old 2-bedroom house that needed work, but it was ours. I remember the day we moved in. Michael ran through the empty rooms, his laughter echoing off the walls. "This is our castle, Mama," he said, and I believed him. I believed we were building something permanent, something safe. I worked on that house whenever I had a spare moment. I painted the walls myself. I fixed the leaking faucet in the kitchen. I planted flowers in the front yard every spring. Michael helped me, even as a little boy. He would hand me tools, even if he did not know what they were for. He would tell me I was the best mama in the whole world. Those words kept me going through the exhaustion and the loneliness. As Michael grew older, I made sure he had opportunities I never had. I enrolled him in a good school. I drove him to soccer practice every weekend, even when I was so tired I could barely see straight. I helped him with his homework every night at the kitchen table. I attended every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every sports event. I wanted him to know he was loved, that he mattered, that he could be anything he wanted to be. Michael was a good kid. He got decent grades. He had friends. He was polite and respectful, at least most of the time. Sure, we had our difficult moments during his teenage years. What parent does not? But we always worked through it. We were a team. It was always just the two of us against the world. When Michael got accepted to the University of Minnesota, I cried tears of joy. I had saved for years to help pay for his education. I worked extra shifts at the medical center. I cut back on everything I could. I wore the same clothes for years. I never went on vacation. I never bought anything for myself unless it was absolutely necessary. Every dollar went toward giving Michael a better future. During his college years, Michael would come home on weekends. We would sit in the kitchen and talk for hours. He would tell me about his classes, his friends, his dreams. He wanted to work in marketing, to be creative, to make a difference. I listened to every word, so proud of the young man he was becoming. He still called me Mama back then. He still hugged me and thanked me for everything I had done for him. That is why what happened later hurt so much, because I knew who he used to be. I knew the kind, thoughtful boy I had raised, and I could not understand where that boy had gone. Michael met Rebecca during his senior year of college. She was a year younger, studying communications. When he first brought her home to meet me, I tried my best to make a good impression. I cleaned the house from top to bottom. I cooked a special dinner. I wanted her to feel welcome, to see that Michael came from a loving home. Rebecca was polite that first evening. She smiled at all the right moments. She complimented the food. She asked me questions about my work as a nurse. But even then, I sensed something beneath the surface, a kind of coolness, a distance. When she looked at the house, I saw something in her eyes, not quite judgment, but close to it, as if she was cataloging everything that was not quite good enough. After dinner, Michael walked Rebecca to her car. Through the window, I watched them talking. Rebecca was gesturing, and Michael was nodding. When he came back inside, he seemed different somehow, more reserved. "So, what did you think?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "She is great," he said, but his tone was flat. Then he added, "You know, Mom, you did not have to go through so much trouble. We could have just ordered pizza or something." "I wanted it to be special," I said. "She is important to you." He nodded but did not say anything else. That night, I felt a small shift between us, something I could not quite name. Looking back now, I realized that was the beginning. Over the next few years, as Michael and Rebecca's relationship grew more serious, I saw less and less of my son. He stopped coming home as often. When he did visit, Rebecca was always with him. And the conversations felt different, stiffer, more formal. Rebecca would talk about her family, her father who was a lawyer, her mother who volunteered on various charity boards. She would mention the neighborhood where she grew up, the private schools she attended. Each story felt like a subtle reminder that my world was smaller, less sophisticated, less impressive. I tried to connect with her. I really did. I asked about her interests, her work, her plans, but every conversation felt like work. She answered my questions politely, but never asked me anything in return. It was as if my life, my experiences, held no interest for her whatsoever. When Michael and Rebecca got engaged, I offered to help with the wedding planning. I had saved a little money, and I wanted to contribute, but Rebecca had already made all the decisions with her mother. The wedding was at an expensive venue in downtown Minneapolis. The guest list was mostly Rebecca's family and friends. I felt like an outsider at my own son's wedding. During the reception, I sat at a table near the back, watching Michael and Rebecca dance. They looked happy. I told myself that was what mattered, that my feelings did not matter as long as my son was happy. But even then, I felt the distance growing between us. Michael barely spent any time with me that day. He was too busy with Rebecca's family, laughing at their jokes, fitting into their world. After the wedding, things got worse. Michael and Rebecca moved into an apartment across town. Michael stopped calling as often. When I called him, he was always busy, always rushing to get somewhere. Our conversations became shorter and shorter. I told myself it was normal. He was building his own life. That is what children are supposed to do, right? But it did not feel normal. It felt like I was losing him. Then came the conversation that changed everything. It was a Sunday afternoon, about 2 years ago. Michael called me out of the blue and asked if he could come over to talk. My heart leaped. I thought maybe he missed our time together. Maybe he wanted to reconnect. He arrived alone. Rebecca was at a yoga class, he said. We sat in the living room, and I made us tea. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with his cup. Finally, he said, "Mom, Rebecca and I have been talking, and we need to ask you something." "Of course," I said. "Anything. We are trying to save money for a house," he explained. "The market is really tough right now, and rent is eating up most of our income. We were wondering if maybe we could move in here for a while, just temporarily. maybe a year or so. It would really help us get on our feet. I did not even hesitate. Of course you can, I said. This is your home, Michael. It will always be your home. The relief on his face was immediate. Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much. We will help with expenses. We will contribute to groceries and utilities. And it really will just be temporary. I believed him. I believed this would bring us closer. I believed I would get my son back. How foolish I was. They moved in 2 weeks later. At first, I tried to give them space. They took over the master bedroom, the one that had been mine. I moved into the smaller bedroom, the one that used to be Michael's when he was growing up. I told myself it did not matter. They were young and needed more room. I could manage with less. Rebecca started changing things almost immediately. She rearranged the living room furniture without asking me. She replaced my curtains with new ones she bought. She filled the kitchen with fancy appliances and organic foods. When I tried to cook meals for everyone, she would politely decline, saying she and Michael were on a special nutrition plan. My food, the food I had always made for Michael, was no longer good enough. Michael went along with everything. He never defended me. He never said, "Mom, this is your house too." He never said, Rebecca, please be respectful." He just became more and more distant, more and more like a stranger. The worst part was watching him change. The Michael I raised would never have let someone treat his mother with such casual disregard. But this new Michael, the one who had been shaped by Rebecca and her world, seemed embarrassed by me, embarrassed by the house, embarrassed by his own history. One evening, I overheard them, talking about me in their room. Rebecca was complaining about how I always asked them about their day. "She is so needy," Rebecca said. "Can you talk to her about giving us some boundaries?" Michael's response was what broke my heart. "I know," he said. "She does not understand that we need our own space. She still thinks I am her little boy or something." I stood in the hallway, my hand over my mouth, trying not to make a sound. Tears ran down my face. My own son thought I was needy. My own son was embarrassed of my love. That night, I understood something painful. The person who was pushing me aside, who was treating me like I did not belong, was not just Rebecca. It was Michael too. He had allowed this to happen. He had chosen to see me the way she saw me, and that realization was more devastating than anything else. I started pulling back after that. I stopped asking about their day. I stopped trying to make conversation at dinner. I stayed in my small bedroom more and more, reading books from the library, watching television on the old set I had moved into the room. I became invisible in my own home, and nobody seemed to notice or care. The months passed, and nothing improved. If anything, the coldness increased. Rebecca's complaints became more frequent. The house was too old. The heating system was inefficient. The neighborhood was not trendy enough. Each complaint felt like a personal attack on everything I had worked so hard to build. Michael never defended the house or me. He just nodded along, agreeing with whatever Rebecca said. Sometimes I wondered if he even remembered all the sacrifices I had made for him. Did he remember the nights I worked cleaning offices so he could have new shoes for school? Did he remember how I went without so he could have everything he needed? Or had Rebecca's world erased all of that from his memory? By the time that cold Tuesday evening in November arrived, when I made the roast chicken dinner and sat in silence while they ignored me, I had already started to understand the truth. I was not a mother to Michael anymore. I was just an inconvenience, a burden, someone in the way of the life he wanted to live. But understanding the truth and accepting it are two very different things, and I was not ready to accept it. Not yet. I kept hoping that somewhere inside the man my son had become, there was still a piece of the boy I raised, the boy who called me the best mama in the world, the boy who held my hand and told me we were a team. I held on to that hope like a lifeline, but with each passing day, that hope grew smaller and smaller, and the question that haunted me every night was simple and terrible. When did I become someone my own son could not love anymore? The weeks after Christmas were the darkest of my life. Michael and Rebecca had gone to her parents' house for the holidays, leaving me alone in the house that suddenly felt cavernous and empty. They did not invite me. They did not even ask if I had other plans. They just left on the morning of December 23rd, with their suitcases packed, barely saying goodbye. I spent Christmas Eve by myself. I thought about putting up a small tree, maybe making myself a nice dinner, but I could not find the energy. Instead, I sat in my bedroom watching old movies on television, trying not to think about all the Christmases when Michael was young, when it was just the two of us creating our own traditions. We would make hot chocolate and decorate cookies. We would drive around Minneapolis looking at the holiday lights. We would open our presents together on Christmas morning, and Michael would hug me and thank me for everything. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now, like a life I had once lived but could no longer access. Michael and Rebecca came back on December 27th. They walked in carrying shopping bags full of gifts from her family, designer clothes, expensive electronics, things I could never afford to give. They did not bring me anything, not even a card. They went straight to their bedroom without acknowledging me sitting in the living room. I heard them laughing about something, their voices muffled through the walls. I sat there for a long time, staring at the television without really seeing it. I felt something hardening inside me, a protective shell forming around the parts of me that still felt pain. I realized I could not keep doing this. I could not keep waiting for scraps of affection from my own son. I could not keep living in this constant state of rejection. January arrived with brutal cold, the kind of Minnesota winter that makes your bones ache. The temperatures dropped below zero, and the snow piled up in heavy drifts around the house. I continued going to work at the medical center, continued doing my job with the same dedication I always had. At least there, I felt useful. At least there, people needed me. But coming home became harder and harder. Each time I walked through that front door, I felt the weight of the silence, the weight of being unwanted. Rebecca had started leaving notes around the house, passive-aggressive reminders about things she wanted me to do or not do. Please keep the thermostat at 68 degrees. Please do not use the kitchen between 6 and 8 in the evening. Please keep your belongings in your room only. My own home had become a place where I needed permission to exist. One evening in mid-January, I came home from work exhausted. It had been a long shift, and I was looking forward to just making myself some tea and resting. But when I walked into the kitchen, I found Rebecca reorganizing the cabinets. She had taken out all my dishes, the ones I had collected over the years, and stacked them on the counter. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She did not even look at me. "I am making the kitchen more efficient," she said. "Some of these old dishes take up too much space. I bought new ones that stack better. You can keep a few of your old ones if you want, but most of them need to go." I stood there, looking at my dishes sitting on the counter like unwanted relics. Each one had a story. The blue plates I bought when Michael started kindergarten, the serving bowl I used for every Thanksgiving dinner, the coffee mugs Michael gave me for Mother's Day over the years. "Those are my things," I said quietly. "You cannot just throw them away." Rebecca finally turned to look at me, her expression one of patient annoyance. "Eleanor, they are just dishes. Old, mismatched dishes. I am trying to make this space work better for all of us. You have to be reasonable." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that this was my house, my kitchen, my life, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just nodded and walked away. Behind me, I heard her continue moving things around, erasing another piece of me from my own home. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed thinking about everything that had led to this moment. I thought about all the years I spent building a life for Michael. I thought about the sacrifices, the exhaustion, the loneliness I endured because I believed I was doing something important. I was being a good mother. I was giving my son a better life than I had. But what did I have to show for it now? A son who barely looked at me, a daughter-in-law who treated me like an inconvenient roommate, a house that no longer felt like home. At 64 years old, I had nothing. No partner, no close friends, because I'd been too busy working and raising Michael to maintain friendships. No hobbies or interests I had developed for myself. My entire identity had been wrapped up in being Michael's mother, and now that he did not need me anymore, I did not know who I was. The breaking point came on a Friday evening in late January. I had taken the day off from work because I was not feeling well. Nothing serious, just a cold that had been lingering for a week. I spent the day resting in my room, trying to recover. Around 6 in the evening, I heard voices in the living room. Michael and Rebecca had invited friends over without telling me. I heard laughter and conversation, the sound of bottles opening, music playing. I lay in my bed, listening to the party happening in my own home, party I was not invited to. After about an hour, I got up to use the bathroom. I tried to be quick and quiet, not wanting to disturb their gathering, but as I walked down the hallway, I heard Rebecca's voice from the living room. She was talking to one of her friends, and she did not realize I could hear her. Honestly, living here has been so much harder than I expected, Rebecca was saying. Her voice was loud, loosened by whatever. She was drinking. Michael's mom is just always around, always hovering, always making these sad little attempts to be included. It is exhausting. One of her friends murmured something sympathetic that I could not quite make out. I know we are saving money, Rebecca continued, but I do not know if it is worth it. This house is old and depressing, and she is just so needy. Michael feels bad, but honestly, I think she needs to understand that we have our own lives. We cannot be responsible for keeping her company just because she is lonely. The words hit me like physical blows. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand pressed against the wall to keep myself steady. I waited for Michael to say something, to defend me, to tell Rebecca she was being cruel, but he said nothing. Through the doorway, I could see him sitting on the couch, nodding along with whatever Rebecca was saying, not defending me, not standing up for me, just agreeing with his wife that his mother was a burden. I turned and went back to my room as quietly as I could. I closed the door and sat on the edge of my bed, shaking. The cold I had been fighting suddenly felt worse. My chest felt tight, my head pounded, but none of that physical discomfort compared to the pain in my heart. That night, as their party continued without me, I made a decision. I could not keep living like this. I could not keep being treated as less than human in my own home. Something had to change, and it had to change soon. Over the next few days, I started paying attention to things I had been trying to ignore. I started noticing how Michael and Rebecca talked about their future plans that never included me. They discussed neighborhoods they wanted to move to eventually. They talked about the kind of house they wanted to buy. They planned trips and adventures. In all these conversations, I was nowhere. I was an obstacle to overcome, not a person to consider. I also started noticing how they used the house. They had taken over every common space. The living room was decorated with their things. The kitchen was arranged for their convenience. Even the small back porch, where I used to sit in the summer and have my morning coffee, had been claimed by Rebecca for her yoga practice. I had been pushed into the smallest bedroom, and now it seemed like even that space was too much, like I was taking up room that should belong to them. One morning, I was getting ready for work when I overheard another conversation. Michael and Rebecca were in the kitchen, and they did not realize I was still in the house. I had come back inside because I forgot my badge for the medical center. We need to have a serious talk with her, Rebecca was saying. Her tone was firm, decided. This living arrangement was supposed to be temporary, but it has been 2 years. We have saved enough for a down payment now. We need to start looking for our own place. I know, Michael said. But what about Mom? Where would she go? My heart lifted slightly. At least he was thinking about me. At least he cared enough to ask that question. But then Rebecca responded, and that small hope was crushed. Michael, she is a grown woman. She has a job. She can take care of herself. We cannot be responsible for her forever. We have to think about our own future, about starting our family. We cannot do that with your mother in the next room. The casual cruelty of her words took my breath away. We cannot be responsible for her forever. As if I had asked them to be responsible for me. As if I had not been the one taking care of Michael his entire life. As if this house, the house they were living in rent-free, was not mine. Michael was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You are right. We will talk to her this weekend." I left the house before they could see me. I drove to work in a daze, barely paying attention to the road. All day, I went through the motions of my job, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept hearing Rebecca's words over and over. We cannot be responsible for her forever. That evening, I came home late. I had stopped at a coffee shop after work, needing time to think before facing them. When I finally walked through the front door, the house was quiet. Michael and Rebecca were in their bedroom with the door closed. I went to my room and sat on my bed, looking around at the small space that had become my entire world. On my nightstand was a photograph of Michael as a little boy. He was maybe 7 years old in the picture, smiling at the camera with a missing front tooth. I was next to him, my arm around his shoulders, both of us laughing at something. I picked up the photograph and studied it, trying to remember what we had been laughing about. I could not recall the specific moment, but I remembered the feeling, the pure, simple joy of being his mother, the certainty that we would always be there for each other. When did that change? When did my love become a burden to him? When did I become someone he needed to escape from? I set the photograph down and noticed something else on the nightstand. A small wooden box that Michael had made for me in woodshop class when he was in 8th grade. It was crude and uneven, clearly the work of a beginner, but I had treasured it. Inside, I kept small mementos. A birthday card Michael made me when he was 10. A Mother's Day coupon book he created, promising things like 1 free hug, or I will do the dishes without being asked. A paper he wrote in high school about the person he admired most. He had written about me, about how I worked so hard to give him a good life, about how I never gave up, even when things were difficult. I read that paper now, tears blurring the words. This is who I thought I was raising, I whispered to the empty room. A son who appreciated sacrifice, a son who understood love. But that boy was gone. Or maybe he had never really existed. Maybe I had just seen what I wanted to see. Maybe I had built a fantasy of our relationship that was never based in reality. The weekend arrived, and I knew the conversation was coming. I could feel it in the air, in the way Michael and Rebecca exchanged glances, in the way they seemed to be working up the courage to say something. On Saturday afternoon, Michael finally knocked on my bedroom door. "Mom," he said through the door, "can we talk? Rebecca and I need to discuss something with you." "I will be right out," I said. I stood up and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired, old. The face staring back at me was not the strong woman who had raised a child alone. It was someone defeated, worn down by constant rejection. I took a deep breath and opened the door. They were waiting in the living room, sitting together on the couch. Michael gestured to the chair across from them, and I sat down. The formality of the setup told me everything I needed to know about what was coming. "Mom," Michael started, his voice uncomfortable. "Rebecca and I have been talking, and we think it is time we start looking for our own place. We have saved enough money now, and we really appreciate you letting us stay here, but we need to move forward with our lives." I nodded slowly, my face carefully neutral. "I see," I said. "When are you planning to leave?" Rebecca leaned forward, her expression what she probably thought was kind but came across as condescending. "We will probably start looking next month. These things take time, so maybe we will be out by spring. We just wanted to give you advance notice." Spring. They were going to leave in spring. And then what? I would be alone in this house. The house I had filled with so much love, so much effort. The house that held every memory of raising my son. I would be alone with the ghosts of what used to be. "All right," I said quietly. "Thank you for letting me know." Michael looked relieved, as if he had expected me to make a scene. "That is it?" he asked. "You are okay with this?" What else could I say? I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. This was not the boy I raised. This was a man who had learned to see his own mother as an inconvenience, a man who valued his comfort over loyalty, a man who had forgotten where he came from. "I hope you will be very happy in your new home," I said, standing up. "If you will excuse me, I have some things to take care of." I walked back to my bedroom and closed the door. Behind me, I heard them start talking again, their voices low. I did not care what they were saying. Something inside me had finally broken, but in breaking, it had also hardened into something new, something that would not accept being treated this way anymore. They wanted to move forward with their lives. Fine, but I had a life too, and it was time. I started fighting for it. The days after that conversation were strange. On the surface, nothing had changed. Michael and Rebecca continued their routines. I continued mine. We moved around each other like polite strangers sharing space. But inside me, something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer waiting for them to see me, to value me, to remember who I was to them. I was done waiting. I started spending my evenings differently. Instead of hiding in my bedroom, I began going through old documents and paperwork I had stored away over the years. The deed to the house, mortgage papers that showed every payment I had made, utility bills in my name, property tax records, bank statements showing decades of deposits from my nursing salary. I laid it all out on my bed and studied it carefully. This house was mine. Legally, completely, undeniably mine. Michael and Rebecca had contributed nothing to it. They had lived here rent-free for 2 years, saving their money while I continued paying for everything. The electricity they used, the heat that kept them warm through the brutal Minnesota winters, the water, the internet, the property taxes, all of it came from my paycheck. I thought about Rebecca's words. We cannot be responsible for her forever. The irony would have been funny if it was not so painful. They were not responsible for me. I was responsible for them. I had been carrying them this entire time, and they had convinced themselves they were doing me a favor. On Monday morning, I called a lawyer. I found one through a recommendation from a colleague at the medical center. Her name was Patricia Morrison, and she specialized in family law and property matters. I made an appointment for later that week. At work, I moved through my shifts with a clarity I had not felt in months. I was good at my job. I was respected by my colleagues and appreciated by my patients. Outside of that house on Maple Avenue, I was not a burden. I was not invisible. I was a competent, capable woman who had built a life through her own hard work. I needed to remember that. On Thursday afternoon, I sat in Patricia Morrison's office. She was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I told her everything, about Michael and Rebecca moving in, about how they had taken over my home, about the conversations I had overheard, about their plan to move out in the spring. She listened carefully, taking notes. When I finished, she looked up at me with an expression that was both sympathetic and determined. "Eleanor," she said, "let me be very clear about something. This is your house. You owe these people nothing. Not your son, not his wife. Nothing. They have been living in your home, using your resources, and from what you have told me, treating you with disrespect and contempt. I know," I said quietly, "but he is my son. I do not want to hurt him." Patricia leaned forward. "I understand that, but you need to ask yourself something. Is he concerned about hurting you? From everything you have told me, it sounds like he and his wife have been hurting you for 2 years, and they have not lost any sleep over it." Her words hit hard because they were true. Michael had watched me shrink and suffer in my own home, and he had done nothing. He had chosen Rebecca's comfort over my dignity every single time. "What are my options?" I asked. Patricia pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "You have several options. The simplest is to give them formal notice to vacate. In Minnesota, if someone is living in your home without a lease and not paying rent, you can give them notice to leave, typically 30 days, though we could negotiate longer if you wanted to give them time to find a place. And if they refuse, then we proceed with a formal removal process through the courts. But honestly, I do not think it will come to that. Once they realize you are serious, once they understand this is a legal matter, they will leave." I sat back in my chair, processing this information. The idea of legally removing my own son from my home felt surreal. But what was the alternative? To continue living as a ghost in my own life? To spend my remaining years being treated like an inconvenience? "There is something else you should consider," Patricia said gently. "From what you have told me, your son and his wife have saved a considerable amount of money over these 2 years by living with you rent-free. Money they would have spent on housing. That is money you essentially gave them by providing free accommodation." I had not thought about it that way, but she was right. While I had been paying all the bills, they had been building their savings. They had used me, whether they wanted to admit it or not. "What do you want to do, Eleanor?" Patricia asked. "And what outcome would make you feel like you have your life back?" I thought about that question for a long moment. What did I want? I wanted my home back. I wanted to feel comfortable in my own space again. I wanted to stop apologizing for existing. But more than anything, I wanted Michael to understand what he had done. I wanted him to see how deeply he had hurt me. Whether that was possible, I did not know. "I want them to leave," I said finally. "But I want to handle it my way first, before we take any legal action. I want to talk to Michael one more time. I need to try." Patricia nodded. "That is your choice. But Eleanor, if I can give you some advice from years of doing this work, people rarely change when they are comfortable. Your son has been comfortable treating you this way because there have been no consequences. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their bad behavior. I left her office with a folder full of information and a clarity of purpose I had not felt in a long time. Patricia was right. I had been enabling this situation by accepting it, by making myself smaller, by never standing up for myself. That ended now. Over the next few days, I prepared myself for what I needed to do. I rehearsed conversations in my head. I thought about what I wanted to say to Michael, how I could make him understand. Part of me still hoped that if I just explained how I felt, if I just made him see what this had done to me, he would care. He would apologize. He would become the son I thought I had raised. But another part of me, the part that had been hardening over these past months, knew better. People show you who they are through their actions, not their words. And Michael had been showing me, for 2 years, that I did not matter to him anymore. On Saturday morning, I decided it was time. Michael was alone in the kitchen, making coffee. Rebecca had gone to the gym. This was my chance to talk to him privately, father to son, one last time. I walked into the kitchen, and he looked up, surprised to see me. "Morning, Mom," he said with that polite distance that had become normal between us. "Michael," I said, my voice steady, "I need to talk to you about something important. Can you sit down?" He looked confused but nodded, sitting at the kitchen table. I sat across from him, the same table where I had helped him with homework so many years ago, the same table where we had eaten countless meals together, the same table where I thought we had built a relationship that would last forever. "I have been doing a lot of thinking," I began, "about this living arrangement, about how things have been between us." He shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, if this is about us moving out, we already told you we are looking for a place. It is going to take some time, but we will be gone soon. That is not what this is about," I said. "Or maybe it is, but not in the way you think. Michael, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Do you have any idea how you and Rebecca have treated me these past 2 years?" He blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean the way you have made me feel invisible in my own home, the way you have let Rebecca disrespect me, change my house, throw away my belongings, the way you have ignored me, excluded me, talked about me like I am a burden. Do you have any idea what that has done to me?" Michael looked down at his coffee cup. "Mom, we have never meant to make you feel bad. We are just trying to live our lives. In my house," I said, my voice rising slightly. "You are trying to live your lives in my house, Michael, the house I bought, the house I have paid for 38 years, the house I raised you in, and you have treated me like I am the guest, like I am the one who does not belong. We have been saving money," he said defensively. "We told you it was temporary." "Temporary," I repeated. 2 years. Michael, 2 years of living here without paying rent. 2 years of me covering all the expenses while you save your money. 2 years of me making myself smaller and smaller to accommodate you. And not once, not one single time have you thanked me. Not once have you acknowledged what I have done for you. Not just these past 2 years, but your entire life." He looked up at me then, and I saw something in his eyes. Not understanding. Not remorse, but defensiveness. "Mom, I do not know what you want me to say. We appreciate you letting us stay here. But you offered. We did not force you." Those words felt like a slap. "You are right," I said quietly. "I offered because you are my son, and I thought that meant something. I thought we meant something to each other, but I was wrong. Mom, come on," he said, his tone exasperated. "You are being dramatic." "Dramatic," I said, and suddenly I was angry, really angry, in a way I had not let myself be in years. "I am being dramatic. Michael, I heard what Rebecca said to her friends. I heard her call me needy and depressing. I heard her complain about me to people I have never even met. And you sat there and said nothing. You let your wife talk about your mother like I am some pathetic charity case." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "She was just venting," he said. "She did not mean anything by it." "And what about you?" I asked. "What is your excuse? When did I become someone you could not even look at? When did I become so embarrassing to you?" "You are not embarrassing," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Then why do you treat me like I am? Why do you act like spending 5 minutes talking to me is a chore? I am your mother, Michael. I gave up everything for you. Everything. And this is how you repay me." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I did not ask you to give up everything," he said, his voice loud now. "I did not ask you to sacrifice so much. That was your choice. Mom, you do not get to hold that over me now." The words hung in the air between us. I stared at my son, this man I barely recognized, and felt something inside me die. The last small hope I had been clinging to, the hope that he would understand, that he would care, simply disappeared. "You are right," I said finally, my voice cold and calm. "I do not get to hold it over you, just like you do not get to keep living in my house." His eyes widened. "What?" "I want you and Rebecca out," I said. "You have 30 days. I will put it in writing today." "Mom, you cannot be serious," he said, his voice rising higher. "Where are we supposed to go?" "You said you have been saving money," I replied. "You said you were ready to start looking for your own place. So look, you have a month. That is more than generous." "This is crazy," he said. "You are upset, and I get it, but you cannot just kick us out." "Yes, I can," I said. "This is my house. Michael, my name is on the deed. I have been more than patient, but I am done. I am done being treated like a burden in my own home. I am done being invisible. I am done sacrificing my comfort and my dignity for people who do not even respect me." Michael just stared at me, shock written all over his face. I realized he had never expected this. He had assumed I would always accept whatever treatment he and Rebecca chose to give me. He had assumed my love meant I would tolerate anything, but love without respect is not really love at all, and I was finally learning to respect myself enough to demand better. "I will have the formal notice ready for you tonight," I said, standing up. "You can discuss it with Rebecca when she gets home. 30 days. Michael, not a day more." I walked out of the kitchen, leaving him sitting there in stunned silence. My hands were shaking, but my resolve was firm. This was the right thing to do, the only thing I could do if I wanted to reclaim any sense of self-worth. I went to my bedroom and closed the door. I could hear Michael pacing in the kitchen, muttering to himself. Then I heard him on the phone, presumably calling Rebecca. His voice was angry, agitated. I did not care. Let them be angry. Let them feel inconvenienced for once. I sat on my bed and picked up the photograph of young Michael again. "Goodbye," I whispered to that smiling little boy. "I will always love who you were, but I cannot keep loving who you have become at the expense of myself." That afternoon, I typed up a formal notice using a template Patricia had given me. 30 days to vacate the premises. I printed it out, signed it, and left it on the kitchen counter. Then I went for a drive, needing to be out of the house when Rebecca came home and saw it. I drove through Minneapolis, through neighborhoods I had known for decades, past the medical center where I had worked for so many years, past Michael's old school, past the park where we used to go on weekends. I drove through my history, saying goodbye to the version of myself who had built everything around being Michael's mother. When I finally returned home that evening, the house was tense and silent. Michael and Rebecca were in their bedroom with the door closed. I could hear raised voices, though I could not make out the words. I made myself dinner, ate alone in my room, and went to bed early. Over the next few days, Michael and Rebecca barely spoke to me. When they did, their voices were cold and clipped. They thought they were punishing me with their silence, but they did not understand that their silence was a relief. I had spent 2 years craving their attention, their acknowledgement. Now I realized I did not need it. I did not need anything from them except for them to leave. I watched them scramble to find a place to live. They had appointments with realtors. They spent evenings on their laptops looking at listings. The urgency in their movements told me they had not actually expected to have to move this quickly. They had grown comfortable here, comfortable using me and my home. But their comfort was ending, and while part of me felt sad about how we had arrived at this point, another part felt something I had not felt in years. I felt powerful. I felt in control of my own life, and most importantly, I felt like I mattered. Rebecca tried to appeal to me once, catching me in the kitchen one morning. "Eleanor," she said, her voice carefully measured. "I think we all said things we did not mean. Maybe we can work this out." Maybe we can come up with a better arrangement. I looked at her, this woman who had spent 2 years making me feel unwelcome in my own home. The arrangement is already in place, I said calmly. You have 3 more weeks. Her expression hardened. You are making a mistake, she said. You are going to regret pushing your only son away. My only son pushed me away a long time ago, I replied. I am just finally accepting it. She walked away without another word, and I felt nothing. No guilt, no second thoughts, just a quiet certainty that I was doing the right thing. Michael tried one more time too, the following Sunday. He knocked on my bedroom door, his voice soft. Mom, can we please talk? I think we should try to fix this. I opened the door and looked at him. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the boy he used to be, but then I remembered all the conversations he had let slide, all the disrespect he had tolerated, all the times he had chosen Rebecca's comfort over my dignity. There is nothing to fix, Michael, I said gently. You made your choices. Now I am making mine. I am your son, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I know, I replied, and I will always love you, but I also have to love myself, and right now, that means asking you to leave. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded and walked away. I closed the door and sat on my bed, feeling the weight of that goodbye settle over me. The days counted down. 3 weeks became 2. 2 became 1. Michael and Rebecca found an apartment across town. They packed their belongings. They arranged for movers. The house slowly began to empty of their presence. And as it did, I began to feel like I could breathe again. Uma pausa na história para te lembrar de curtir o vídeo, se inscrever no canal e contar para nós nos comentários de onde você está ouvindo essa história. Postaremos novos relatos todos os dias. Obrigada. Vamos continuar. The day Michael and Rebecca moved out was a cold Saturday in early March. The snow was finally starting to melt, revealing the brown grass underneath, and there was a hint of spring in the air. It felt symbolic somehow, like the world was waking up from a long winter sleep. And so was I. They had hired movers who came early in the morning. I stayed in my bedroom while they packed up the truck, listening to the sounds of furniture being dragged across floors, boxes being stacked, voices giving instructions. Michael knocked on my door once to tell me they were leaving, but I did not open it. I just said goodbye through the closed door, and after a moment of silence, I heard his footsteps walk away. When I finally heard the front door close for the last time, I waited another 10 minutes before emerging from my room. I needed to be sure they were really gone. When I walked through the house, it felt strange. Empty spaces where their furniture had been, bare walls where Rebecca had hung her artwork. The silence was profound. I stood in the middle of the living room and looked around. This was my house again, truly mine. And for the first time in 2 years, I did not feel like an intruder in my own home. Over the next few weeks, I began the process of reclaiming my space. I moved back into the master bedroom, the one I had given up for them. I repainted the walls a soft blue color I had always loved. I bought new curtains that let in more light. I brought back the dishes Rebecca had tried to throw away, washing each one carefully and putting them back in the cabinets where they belonged. Every change I made felt like a small act of rebellion, a small declaration that I mattered, that my preferences mattered, that my life mattered. I also started doing things I had stopped doing during those 2 years. I joined a book club at the local library. I started taking walks around the neighborhood in the evenings, something I used to love but had given up because I felt uncomfortable leaving the house when Michael and Rebecca were home. I reconnected with a few colleagues from work, going out for coffee or lunch on our days off. Slowly, piece by piece, I began to build a life that was mine alone. Not a life centered around being someone's mother. Not a life spent waiting for scraps of attention from people who did not value me. A life that belonged to me. Michael called a few times during those first weeks. I did not answer. He left voicemails that started angry, then became pleading, then finally faded into awkward small talk about nothing important. I listened to each one, but I did not call back. I was not ready. Maybe I would never be ready, and that was okay too. Rebecca sent a text message once, asking if I could send them some mail that had been delivered to the house. I forwarded the mail without responding to the message. I owed her nothing, not even common courtesy after everything she had put me through. One evening, in late March, I was sitting on my back porch watching the sunset when my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize, but something made me answer it. "Hello?" I said. "Eleanor? Is that you?" The voice was familiar but older, rougher around the edges. "Yes, this is Eleanor. Who is this?" "It is David." My breath caught. David. Michael's father. The man who had left us when Michael was a baby. The man who had not been part of our lives for over 30 years. "What do you want, David?" I asked, my voice cold. He cleared his throat. "I know this is out of the blue. I know I have no right to call you after all these years, but I heard from Michael. He told me what happened between you two, and I just wanted to reach out." Of course Michael had called his father, the father who abandoned him, but when his own mother finally stood up for herself, suddenly he needed to reach out to the man who had never been there for him. The irony was almost funny. "Why would you call me about this?" I asked. "Because I know what I did to you, and Michael was wrong," David said. "I know I was a terrible father and a terrible husband. I have spent most of my life regretting walking away from you both. And when Michael told me what happened, I realized he was doing the same thing I did. He was taking you for granted. He was not seeing what he had until it was gone." I sat in silence, processing his words. After all these years, after all the pain and struggle, now David wanted to share his wisdom. "Michael is angry with you," David continued, "but he is also hurt. He did not realize how much he had hurt you until you stood up for yourself. He is confused, and he does not know how to fix it. Maybe it cannot be fixed," I said quietly. "Maybe not," David agreed. "But I wanted you to know something, Eleanor. You did the right thing. I was not there to see how you raised Michael, but I know it could not have been easy. You gave him everything, and he took it for granted. You had every right to take your life back." Hearing those words from him, of all people, broke something loose inside me. Tears started running down my face, and I did not try to stop them. "I just wanted him to see me," I said, my voice breaking. "I just wanted my son to see me as a person, not just as someone who was supposed to serve him. Was that too much to ask?" "No," David said gently. "That was not too much to ask. And if he cannot see that, that is his failure, not yours." We talked for a few more minutes. David told me he had gotten sober 10 years ago, that he had spent a lot of time in therapy dealing with his regrets. He did not ask for forgiveness, which I appreciated. He just wanted me to know that I deserved better than how I had been treated, both by him and by Michael. After we hung up, I sat on the porch for a long time, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to deep blue. David's call had stirred up old emotions, old memories, but it had also given me something unexpected: validation, confirmation that I was not crazy or selfish or wrong for demanding respect. In April, the weather finally turned warm. The trees started budding, and the neighborhood came alive with color. I planted flowers in my front yard, something I had not done in years because Rebecca had complained about the mess. I chose bright tulips and daffodils, cheerful colors that made me smile every time I came home. One Saturday morning, I was working in the garden when I saw a woman walking by with a small dog. She stopped and complimented my flowers, and we started chatting. Her name was Susan, and she lived 2 houses down. We had been neighbors for years, but I had never really talked to her because I had been too busy, too tired, too focused on Michael. Susan invited me over for coffee, and I accepted. We sat on her porch and talked for hours about everything and nothing. She was a widow, had lost her husband 5 years ago. She talked about the loneliness, about having to rebuild her life after decades of marriage. I told her about Michael, about what had happened, about how I was learning to be just Eleanor, not Michael's mom. "You know what I learned?" Susan said, refilling my coffee cup. "I learned that we spend so much of our lives being what other people need us to be. We are wives, mothers, daughters, employees. We are everything to everyone except ourselves. And then one day, we realize we do not even know who we are anymore." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "The best thing I ever did," Susan continued, "was decide to figure out who I was. Not who I had been or who I was supposed to be, just who I was, right now, at this moment in my life. And you know what I discovered? I actually liked myself. I was interesting and funny and capable. I had just forgotten." Her words stayed with me long after I went home that day. Who was I? Not Michael's mother, not a nurse, though that was my job. Just Eleanor. Who was Eleanor? I started exploring that question. I took a painting class at the community center and discovered I enjoyed it, even though I was terrible at it. I started learning Spanish using an app on my phone, just because I had always wanted to. I volunteered at a local animal shelter on weekends, walking dogs and socializing cats. Each new experience taught me something about myself, revealed parts of me I had never had time to explore when my entire life revolved around Michael. In May, Michael called again. This time, I answered. "Hello, Michael," I said, my voice calm and neutral. "Mom," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice that I had finally picked up. "How are you?" "I am doing well," I replied. "How are you and Rebecca?" "We are okay. We like the new apartment. It is smaller than we wanted, but it is nice." There was an awkward pause. Then Michael said, "Mom, I have been thinking a lot about everything that happened, about what you said, and I just wanted to tell you that I am sorry. I am sorry for how we treated you. I did not see it at the time, but I see it now. His apology should have made me feel better, but instead, I just felt tired." "Thank you for saying that," I said. "Can we see each other?" he asked. "Maybe have dinner or something. I would really like to talk to you in person." I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to say yes, wanted to believe that we could fix our relationship, but another part of me, the part that had spent the last 2 months learning to value myself, was hesitant. "Michael," I said carefully, "I appreciate your apology. I really do. But I need you to understand something. I cannot go back to the way things were. I cannot go back to making myself smaller so you feel more comfortable. If we are going to have a relationship moving forward, it has to be built on mutual respect. Not obligation. Not guilt. Respect." "I understand," he said quickly. "I get it, Mom. I really do." "I am not sure you do," I said gently, "but I am willing to try. We can have dinner next week if you want. Just you and me. Not Rebecca. Not yet." "Okay," he agreed. "Just us." We set a date for the following Thursday. After we hung up, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Hope, but also caution. I wanted to believe Michael had changed, that he finally understood what he had done wrong. But I also knew that real change takes time. One apology did not erase 2 years of hurt. On Thursday evening, I met Michael at a small restaurant in downtown Minneapolis. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table by the window. He stood when he saw me, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "Hi, Michael," I replied. We sat down, and the first few minutes were awkward. We made small talk about the weather, about his job, about nothing important. But eventually, Michael took a deep breath and said, "I need to tell you something. Rebecca and I have been going to counseling." I raised my eyebrows. Surprised. "Counseling?" He nodded. "After we moved out, we were fighting a lot. About you, about money, about everything. Our therapist helped us see some patterns in how we behave, how I behave. And Mom, I realized something. I spent so long being angry at my father for leaving us that I never noticed I was doing the same thing to you. Not by leaving physically, but by checking out emotionally, by taking you for granted." Tears filled my eyes as I listened to him. These were the words I had needed to hear for so long. I was so focused on building my own life, my own success, that I forgot where I came from. Michael continued, "I forgot all the sacrifices you made. And when Rebecca started complaining about you, instead of defending you, I just agreed with her because it was easier, because I had started to see you the way she did, as someone in the way instead of someone who had given me everything." "Why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you let that happen?" He looked down at his hands. "I think part of me was embarrassed," he admitted. "Rebecca comes from this wealthy family with their big house and their connections, and I was ashamed that I came from something different, that my mom was a nurse, who worked 2 jobs, that we lived in a modest house in a normal neighborhood. I was ashamed of the very things I should have been proud of. His honesty broke my heart all over again, but in a different way. I understood shame. I understood wanting to fit into a world that did not quite accept you. But I also understood that his shame had come at my expense. "Michael," I said, "I am glad you are seeing these things now. I am glad you are working on yourself. but you need to understand that it is going to take time for me to trust you again. You hurt me deeply. You made me feel worthless in my own home. That does not just go away because you apologize. I know, he said, wiping his eyes. I do not expect you to forgive me right away. I just want a chance to show you that I can be better, that I can be the son you deserve. We talked for another hour, working through some of the pain, some of the anger. It was not a magical healing moment. We did not hug and cry and pretend everything was fixed, but it was a start, a small, tentative step towards something that might eventually become a real relationship again. Over the next few months, Michael and I saw each other occasionally, coffee once a month, a phone call every few weeks. We were rebuilding slowly, carefully. I set boundaries, and to his credit, he respected them. When he suggested bringing Rebecca to one of our meetings, I said I was not ready, and he accepted that without argument. By summer, I had transformed my life completely. My house felt like home again. I had friends, hobbies, routines that brought me joy. I had learned to enjoy my own company, to value my own thoughts and opinions. I was no longer waiting for someone else to validate my existence. One warm evening in July, I was sitting on my back porch reading a book when my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Michael. Just wanted to say thank you, Mom, for everything you did for me growing up. I never said it enough, but I am saying it now. I love you. I smiled and typed back. I love you too, Michael. Always have, always will, but I love myself now too, and that makes all the difference. As I set my phone down and returned to my book, I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The pain, the rejection, the moment I finally stood up for myself. It had been the hardest thing I had ever done, asking my own son to leave my home, but it had also been the most important thing, because in losing him, I had found myself, and that version of myself, the Eleanor who knew her worth, who demanded respect, who built a life on her own terms, was someone I was proud to be. The house on Maple Avenue was quiet now, but it was not lonely. It was peaceful, and in that peace, I had discovered something I had been searching for my entire life. I had discovered that I was enough. Just me. Just Eleanor. And that was more than enough. The sun set slowly over Minneapolis, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I sat on my porch, surrounded by the flowers I had planted, in the home I had reclaimed, living the life I had finally learned to value. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt completely, entirely, perfectly at peace. Michael and I would continue our journey of rebuilding our relationship. Maybe one day, it would be strong again. Maybe one day, I would be ready to include Rebecca in my life, or maybe not. Either way, I knew I would be okay, because I had learned the most important lesson of all. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And for too long, I had been pouring everything I had into other people, leaving nothing for myself. Now, I was filling my own cup first, and it felt wonderful. Some people might think I was selfish for asking my son to leave. Some might think a mother should sacrifice everything, should accept any treatment, should always put her children first no matter what. But I had learned that real love, healthy love, requires respect from both sides, and I had finally learned to respect myself enough to demand that respect from others. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I raised my cup of tea in a silent toast to new beginnings, to self-respect, to the courage it takes to change your life at any age, and to the understanding that it is never too late to become who you were always meant to be. I was 64 years old, and I was finally, truly, living my own life, and it was beautiful.